The stars above Earth were silent, as they had always been. Cold. Unyielding. The only sound was the deep hum of Draco Connor's battle-worn ship as it glided through the void, heading toward the battlefield of a distant colony world. For years, Drake had fought, bled, and conquered in the name of humanity. It was a legacy of destruction he had created for himself, one that stretched across the farthest reaches of the galaxy. His reputation had grown among the stars, and where it did, so did fear. Alien mercenaries, powerful warlords who sought dominion over the known universe, had learned one truth they would never forget: Earth was not weak. Draco Connor had become a legend, and his battle cry, the echo of his fury, was a herald to any alien that dared to challenge the human race. This world, Zoreth 9, had been taken by Kresh the Tyrant, one of the most ruthless and cunning warlords in the galaxy. Kresh had sent his forces to Earth years ago, but Earth's resolve was unbreakable. Kresh had underestimated humanity's will to survive, and Draco Connor had become the instrument of that survival. Drake's fingers gripped the edge of the command seat, his mind sharp and focused. He hadn't slept in days. He didn't need sleep, not with the war on his doorstep. His ship decelerated rapidly as it entered the atmosphere, breaking the sound barrier. The landing was as smooth as Drake's hand against the cold steel of his blade. He didn't need to think. His body was an extension of the mission, instinctive and brutal. Target acquired, Commander. The voice of his AI companion, Siri, chimed in. Approaching mercenary stronghold in 5 minutes. Drake's jaw tightened. He'd been through 100 battles, each more vicious than the last. But this would be different. Zoreth 9 was known for its merciless landscape, a combination of deadly weather patterns, toxic atmosphere, and war-torn cities. But none of that mattered now. Kresh had dared to challenge Earth, and now it was time for the reckoning. The ship hit the ground with a loud thud. Dust kicked up in every direction, and the impact sent vibrations through the hull. Drake didn't wait for the dust to settle. He was already at the hatch, his boots hitting the ground in rapid succession. The soldiers waiting outside had already formed ranks, ready to move. The moment Drake stepped out of the ship, his presence became a storm. "Remember, gentlemen," he barked, his voice cutting through the roar of distant explosions. "We're not just fighting to win this battle. We're sending a message to every damn mercenary in the galaxy. Earth is no one's plaything. You kill them, no mercy. And you make them wish they'd never laid eyes on our world." His men nodded. They had all been under his command for years. They understood. But still, there was something about Draco Connor, a quiet intensity in his eyes, a coldness that turned even the most hardened veterans to ice. They stormed the mercenary stronghold, weapons raised, ready for the brutal dance of combat. The enemy had no idea what was coming for them. The initial firefight was fast and chaotic, gunfire cutting through the air, bodies collapsing in rapid succession. But Drake was a machine. He carved through the alien ranks with ease. His blade sang with every strike, each one leaving a trail of blood and decimated limbs. The sound of his battle cry echoed over the battlefield as he fought his way to the heart of the mercenary fortress. Then, a sharp crack rang out, followed by an explosion that sent debris flying. The ground trembled beneath Drake's feet, but he didn't flinch. He charged forward, cutting down any alien that dared to stand in his way. His men followed suit, pushing forward with relentless efficiency. As they reached the command center, Drake paused. His sharp gaze swept over the room, locking onto the alien commander, a large, reptilian figure draped in armor, a menacing aura surrounding him. "You should have never come here, Kresh," Drake said, his voice a low growl. His eyes narrowed as he took in the alien warlord's form. "I'm the last thing you'll ever see." Kresh grinned, a cruel, toothy smile. "You think you can win this, human? My armies are legion. You are nothing but a speck in the cosmos. Even if you destroy me, there will be others. We always come back." Drake's lip curled into a sneer. "Not if I kill every last one of you." With that, he lunged. The battle was fierce. Kresh was a skilled fighter, his massive form moving with surprising agility. The two clashed, Drake's blade clashing against the alien's massive warhammer, sparks flying with each collision. The ground beneath them cracked, the energy in the air crackling with the intensity of their blows. But Drake was faster. His strikes were relentless, fueled by the rage of years of war, loss, and vengeance. He disarmed Kresh, sending the warhammer skidding across the room. With a final, swift strike, Drake plunged his blade into the alien's chest, ending the tyrant's reign once and for all. Kresh's eyes widened in disbelief, his mouth opening to speak, but no words came. With his last breath, he looked into Drake's eyes, knowing that his victory would not come. You may have won this battle, human, Kresh gasped. But the war has only just begun. Drake looked down at the fallen warlord, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. The battle had been won, but at what cost? He knew that Kresh's death would only send ripples through the galaxy, and more enemies would come. As his soldiers began to regroup and assess the damage, Drake's mind turned to Earth. The war was far from over. There were more forces out there, waiting to challenge them. He had crushed Kresh, but what came next would be even more dangerous. The universe was a much larger place than Drake had ever imagined, and humanity's fight for survival was only just beginning. The next days were filled with preparations. The victory on Zarath 9 was significant, but it was only the beginning of the struggle. Drake knew that Kresh had been a puppet in a much larger scheme, and the galaxy was filled with threats even worse than the tyrant himself. Drake, we can't do this alone. Commander Tessa Harrington, one of his most trusted allies, said as they stood over a table filled with holographic projections of galactic maps. We need allies. We need to gather our forces before the next wave hits us. Drake's eyes were narrowed, his face grim. Who do you suggest we call? We've already fought off the strongest mercenary force in the galaxy. If they want Earth, they'll come for it, and they'll bring everything they have. Tessa sighed. The Galactic Resistance, the Kelnari rebels, even the Voltorians. They'll fight alongside us, but we need to prove that we're worth their trust. Drake's hand slammed onto the table. We don't have time for politics. Earth needs its warriors now. I'll make them understand. The alliance was born out of necessity. Drake traveled to distant worlds, seeking out the scattered factions that had once fought against the same enemies. Some were skeptical. Others saw the potential for profit, but all knew the truth. Earth was a prize, and whoever controlled it would control the future of the galaxy. And so Drake O'Connor's next mission became clear. He would unite the fractured factions into one unstoppable force. Earth would not fall. Not on his watch. Drake stood on the bridge of his ship, staring out at the endless stars. The blackness of space was both comforting and suffocating. It was a place where he had fought countless battles, where victory had tasted sweet, but was always overshadowed by the inevitable threat of more enemies. The holographic projections of potential allies flickered before him, the faces of alien leaders who could either aid or betray him. There was the Kelnari, a race of highly advanced warriors who had been driven to the fringes of space by the expanding power of the Valtorian Empire. Then there were the Valtorians themselves, massive, reptilian beings known for their brutal efficiency in battle. Though distrustful of humans, they had been forced into a fragile peace with Earth when Drake had defeated Kresh, but they were still unpredictable. Tessa Harrington stood beside him, her arms crossed, looking at the same map of the galaxy. You're certain this is the right course of action? I'm not going to lie to you, Drake. We might be able to win a few battles, but bringing these factions together, it's going to take more than just fear of losing Earth. Drake's voice was low, unwavering. They'll come because they have no choice. The warlords who've ravaged their worlds are no different from Kresh, and Earth's victories speak louder than any words I could say. They'll see what we're capable of. I hope you're right. If we fail, Earth could become the next target. Drake's jaw tightened. He couldn't afford to think about failure. He wouldn't. We don't fail. The first of the galactic factions Drake reached out to were the Kelnari. A once proud species, the Kelnari had been driven to near extinction by the Valtorians' relentless conquest. Now their homeworld lay in ruins, and they lived as nomads on the outskirts of the galaxy. Their technology, though outdated by galactic standards, was deadly in the hands of their warriors. The negotiations were tense. The Kelnari had a deep, mistrustful nature, forged by centuries of oppression. Drake's presence was seen as both a boon and a threat. But after hours of tense diplomacy, and a demonstration of Earth's strength in ambush on a group of Valtorian raiders, an agreement was made. The Kelnari would join the fight, but only if Drake proved he could lead them into victory. Drake's reputation had preceded him, but now he would be tested by their greatest warriors. It was a brutal affair, a series of mock battles in which Drake would have to prove he was the equal of their best. As the battle raged on an asteroid field, Drake found himself facing a Kelnari champion, a hulking beast of a warrior, armed with a giant two-handed axe. The Kelnari's warrior class was known for its physical prowess, and this one was no exception. The moment the duel began, Drake was forced onto the defensive. The Kelnari's speed and strength were overwhelming, and for the first time in years, Drake found himself struggling. But Drake didn't back down. Every strike the Kelnari made was met with a calculated counter, every blow absorbed with the resilience of a man who had lived through worse. Sweat dripped from his brow as he circled his opponent, waiting for the perfect moment. The Kelnari charged, raising the axe high for a killing blow, and Drake seized his opportunity. He sidestepped, using his agility to gain the upper hand. With a swift maneuver, he disarmed the champion, sending the axe tumbling into space. The Kelnari warrior stood frozen for a moment before slowly lowering his hands in respect. "You are a worthy leader, Drake O'Connor. You have earned our allegiance." The battle was won, but Drake knew this was just one step in a much larger war. The Kelnari were now allies, but the Valtorians remained the largest threat. Next came the Valtorians. Negotiations with them were even more difficult, their honor-bound culture making it impossible to negotiate by force alone. Drake's meeting with their leader, Tyros, took place on a barren, desolate moon where the tension was palpable. Tyros was a towering figure, his scaled body shimmering in the dim light of the moon's red sun. His eyes, sharp and calculating, never left Drake's face as they exchanged words. "You have defeated Kresh, human, but that is no guarantee of victory," Tyros rumbled in his deep, resonant voice. "We, the Voltorians, are conquerors by nature. You may have Earth's warriors, but we have the armies to annihilate any who stand against us." Drake stood firm, refusing to flinch under Tyros's gaze. "I've fought your kind before, Tyros. You can threaten me all you want, but it won't change the fact that Earth isn't a planet to be taken lightly." Tyros's lips curled into a grin, sharp teeth glistening. "Bold words. But will you still be so confident when my forces arrive at your doorstep?" Drake's heart pounded. The Valtorians had the numbers to crush any resistance, and yet something in their eyes told him that they were not as invincible as they appeared. Drake knew that to survive, they would need more than just strength. They needed to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies, to show them that they could defeat the Valtorians on their own terms. It was a gamble, a test of wills. Drake knew that his leadership had to be unquestionable, and the fate of Earth depended on him, convincing the Valtorians to fight at his side. After days of tense discussions, Drake issued an ultimatum. Earth would fight, and the Valtorians could either stand beside them as allies or face them as enemies. It was a high-risk move, but Tyros, respecting Drake's tenacity and seeing the growing power of Earth's resistance, finally agreed. The Valtorians would join the alliance, but only on the condition that Drake would lead them into the heart of enemy territory. No more hesitation, no more waiting. "We shall see if your resolve matches your reputation, human," Tyros said with a sly grin. "The galaxy will tremble at the name Drake O'Connor." With the Kelnari and Valtorians at his side, Drake knew the next step was to prepare for the inevitable clash with the warlords who had controlled the galaxy for too long. The coalition of Earth's warriors, alien defectors, and allies was ready, but there was still one enemy left to face: the Conclave, a cabal of mercenary warlords who held the galaxy in a stranglehold. They would not let Earth slip from their grasp without a fight. But Drake O'Connor wasn't a man who feared battles. He was a man who thrived on them. The final battle for the galaxy was approaching. The coalition assembled in deep space, ready to launch a full-scale assault on the Conclave's fortress, the heart of their mercenary empire. Drake's ship, the Vengeance, was at the forefront, leading the charge. The combined forces of Earth's warriors, the Kelnari, and the Valtorians were a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Conclave had no idea what was coming for them. Drake stood in the command center of the Vengeance, looking out at the stars as they sped toward their target. His mind was clear, focused. There was no room for hesitation. Earth's survival depended on the coming conflict. "This is it," Tessa said, her voice steady as she stood next to Drake. "We either end this, or we die trying." Drake nodded. "We don't die. Not today." With a single command, the assault began. The battle that followed would be remembered as the one that changed the galaxy forever. The stars streaked by in the distance, a glittering tapestry of light and darkness. Drake O'Connor stood in the command center of the Vengeance, staring out at the black void beyond. The battle was imminent, the final showdown between his coalition of Earth's warriors, the Kelnari, the Valtorians, and the merciless conclave of warlords who had torn the galaxy apart for centuries. There was no more time for hesitation. It had come down to this, a war to secure the future of Earth, to stop the conclave once and for all. Tessa stood by his side, her expression grim. eyes scanning the display of tactical maps on the holographic table. We're in position. The Conclave's stronghold is dead ahead, but we've got no intel on their defenses beyond the perimeter. They're expecting us, Drake. Drake's mind was ablaze, sharp and relentless. He turned to her, his eyes unwavering. Good. Let them expect us. Let them feel the weight of Earth's wrath. He looked at the crew assembled around the table, human and alien alike. The Kelnari were steely-eyed warriors with nothing left to lose. The Valtorians were quiet, disciplined, their large forms imposing but not out of place among their allies. Earth's forces, led by Drake, were the backbone of this alliance. They had fought side by side, bled together on countless worlds. Now, they had only one goal: to break the Conclave's stranglehold on the galaxy and end their reign of terror. Drake, the first wave is ready, Tessa said, glancing at the tactical display. We'll hit the outer defenses first. But the real challenge will be pushing past their command center. That's where the Conclave's leadership is if we want to end this. That's where we'll need to go. Drake nodded. We'll break their outer defenses, but we need to keep moving. No stopping. Once we breach the command center, that's where the Conclave's leaders will make their last stand. We can't afford to give them any time to regroup. With a final, resolute glance at his crew, Drake issued the command: prepare for battle. Full assault. No mercy. The battle began as expected. The Vengeance and the fleet of Allied ships surged forward, cutting through space with deadly precision. The Conclave's outer defenses, massive battle stations, and energy shields lit up in an explosion of fire as the fleet tore through them. Drake's ship led the charge, the gunships and bombers following in a tight formation. In the lead, Drake's voice rang out over the comms, his tone ice-cold, commanding. Engage all targets, weapons hot, no survivors. The Conclave's mercenaries were fierce and well-prepared, but they had never faced an enemy like this. Drake's forces struck with unparalleled coordination, overwhelming the defensive positions. The Conclave's ships, massive and intimidating, were torn apart one by the onslaught of precision strikes. The battle was brutal, but it was also a slaughter. Earth's warriors alongside their alien allies fought with a relentless ferocity that stunned the enemy. Through the chaos, Drake's ship carved a path through the debris, heading straight for the heart of the Conclave's stronghold. The journey was swift, but the closer they got, the heavier the resistance became. Conclave warships emerged from the darkness, but Drake and his forces tore through them like a hurricane. The final obstacle was the Conclave's flagship, the Vortex, a massive, heavily armored warship that dwarfed anything Drake had ever seen. Its shields were impenetrable, its weapons capable of vaporizing entire fleets with a single shot. But Drake had no intention of running from this fight. Ready the breach, he ordered, his voice unwavering. Tessa looked up from the tactical display. We'll need to disable their shields first. If we hit them head-on, it'll be suicide. Drake didn't blink. Then we'll do what we do best. We'll strike fast, and we'll strike hard. The fleet maneuvered into position, preparing for the final assault on the Vortex. Drake's heart pounded as they approached, adrenaline surging through him. He had fought many battles, but this one, the final clash, was different. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making a statement. It was about showing the Conclave, and the rest of the galaxy, that Earth's warriors were not to be trifled with. Drake's hand clenched around the controls as the ships opened fire. A barrage of missiles and energy blasts slammed into the Vortex, rattling its shields. For a moment, nothing happened. The Vortex seemed invincible, but Drake's crew didn't stop. They kept pushing forward, each strike driving the enemy closer to the edge. We've got a breach, one of the tactical officers shouted. Shields are down. Go, 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 Drake barked. With a roar, the Vengeance surged forward, its cannons blazing as it tore into the Vortex. The flagship groaned under the assault, its hull beginning to buckle and crack. The Conclave's forces retaliated, but their counterattacks were no match for the fury of the Alliance's combined might. Target their bridge, Drake ordered, his voice like steel. Take out their command center. In a single, calculated maneuver, the Vengeance tore through the heart of the Vortex. The ship's core, overloaded by the concentrated barrage of fire, began to collapse inward. The Vortex shuddered and groaned as it began to break apart. On board the Vortex, the Conclave's leaders watched in horror as their flagship was torn apart. At the center of it all was the leader of the Conclave, a ruthless warlord named Zathar, a towering figure whose very presence exuded power. Zathar's deep, guttural voice echoed through the command deck as he issued orders to his subordinates. They are too strong. We must. His voice was cut off as the lights flickered and alarms blared. The vortex was falling apart. He turned to face the approaching doom. His warlords, powerful and untouchable until now, stood around him, but there was no hope left. Zatar's eyes burned with rage. Prepare for the final stand. We will die fighting. Outside, in the vast expanse of space, the final battle raged on. The vortex was sinking into the depths of chaos, but Drake knew it wasn't over yet. He had come this far, and he would not stop until the Conclave was no more. Drake's ship was among the first to board the disintegrating vortex. His warriors moved with purpose, storming through the halls of the flagship, cutting down Conclave mercenaries who had once been unstoppable. The Conclave's leadership had been shattered, but Zathar, like all warlords, refused to surrender. Drake, flanked by his fiercest soldiers, moved toward the bridge where the final confrontation would take place. The door to the command center exploded inward with a blast, and Drake strode into the room. Zatar was there, towering and enraged, his massive weapon in hand. "You think you can end me, human?" Zathar's voice was a deep growl, reverberating with anger. Drake didn't flinch. "I'm not here to end you. I'm here to end the Conclave." The battle was brutal. Zathar's strength was unmatched, his strikes capable of crushing Drake with a single blow. But Drake was faster. His blade was a blur, cutting through the air, deflecting Zathar's attacks with deadly precision. The two warriors clashed with the fury of entire armies, each strike shaking the room. Finally, with a quick, devastating maneuver, Drake plunged his blade into Zathar's chest, the warlord's last breath, escaping his lips in a terrible rasp. The Conclave's reign of terror had ended. Drake stood over Zathar's body, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. The battle was over. The Conclave was finished. Earth had been saved. Tessa's voice came over the comms. "It's done. The vortex is falling apart. We've won." Drake's eyes hardened. The fight was far from over. There were still more warlords, more threats in the galaxy. But one thing was certain. Earth had shown its strength, and the universe would never forget the name of Drake O'Connor. As the vortex disintegrated around them, Drake looked out at the stars once more. The battle had been won, but the war was eternal. And Drake would fight it until his last breath.